It was so cheap.
How cheap was it?
Let me send this picture. When you're talking and you're just kind of yammering on, I can just look out and just imagine what it's like outside.
Oh, if I could just be anywhere else, just anywhere else.
Well, early in the week.
No, we're doing it really late in the week. We missed a week.
Well, I wouldn't say we missed it. Welcome to Pondering Psalms. Today we're taking a look at Psalm 100. I'm here with my very good, extraordinary friend.
Regular, ordinary friend, Curt.
And I am David Mullins, and we have been looking at Psalm 100 a little bit longer than what we usually do. Usually we live in it for a week, but with Christmas and New Year's, we took a short little break. And so I have been looking at Psalm 100 for about a week and a half, which is wild because it's 5
hilarious.
Verses.
Yeah, it's one of the shortest Psalms, and it took us longer to actually review it. Get it in our heads.
Yeah, but it's a great Psalm, and we're going to take a look at it today.
Okay.
So, ready to jump in?
Go.
Right, there we go. Psalm 100, a psalm of thanksgiving, and there it is, my friends, in all of its glory. That's the whole thing. Just one slide.
So we should be done in about 10 minutes, right?
Well, we could, but there's really just so much here, I think. The psalmist is telling us to shout, to acknowledge, to enter his gates, and tells us why. All within.
Let's see. That's it.
Worship.
We're done.
I missed worship. Worship is in there too, and also come before him. So where did you land in this, my friend?
Well, let's just assume everybody's read it. Or it took the 5 minutes that it takes to read the whole thing before we jump in. But I will. I think one of the things that really jumped off the page to me as I read it this last 10 days, is that if you're a part of the charismatic movement, this is your banner song, right? This is the one that kind of helps take you where you need to go in worship every week. But for those of us who are more mild-mannered in our worship styles, less enthusiastic, say, this really does have a challenge to, how often do you really shout with joy to the Lord? And that's how it jumps right off there. Is shout with joy to the Lord, all the earth, everybody, not just the charismatics, everybody.
And a lot of times in the Psalms, the psalmist will talk about nations, all nations, or Israel. But this time he's just letting it out. It doesn't matter. It's all the earth. Even, I guess, even animals shout to joy to the Lord. I mean, they are connected to God as well in a way that I don't understand, but yet they are created by him. And so, shout to the Lord with joy to the Lord, all the earth, everyone, everything, because he is the Lord.
Well, and then verse 3, acknowledge this, right?
Yeah.
This is the thing. This is the reason you're doing this. You're acknowledging that the Lord is God.
And this was a big deal because Israel was locked in the center of nations that surrounded them that did not acknowledge that the Lord is God. They had other gods. They believed these other gods would help them in this, that, or the other thing. And the psalmist is like, you know what? No, there's only one who is truly God, and he is the Lord. He is our Lord as well. He made us. We are his.
That's beautiful. It really is beautiful. Yeah. And then again, pulling up the sheep of his pasture. That's kind of a repeated theme throughout the Psalms.
Yes.
And it's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Because sometimes we forget who we are. And we forget that we have been fearfully and wonderfully made. And we forget that we were made for a reason and a purpose. And he takes pleasure in us, and we are his people. we are the sheep of his pastures. Just and really there are a lot of jumping up points in this. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. I think of Psalm 23.
Sure. Yeah.
Shout with joy. There are so many Psalms. I mean, this really encompasses so much of the Psalms.
When I was a boy, my mom taught Sunday. We were going to a little bitty church, little podunk church. I mean, like 12
How little
people.
was it, Curt?
Like my brother and I were the people who passed the offering trays because there were only like 12 people in there, and most of them had broken a hip at some point, couldn't get up and move around very much. And Herman Zimmerman was a neighbor of ours, but Mom had taught Vacation Bible School for the 4 kids that were actually a part of this. And one of the things she had taught about is that, and I don't know where she got this, but supposedly when David was a shepherd and he'd call the sheep, he'd call Tahu, Tahu. And somehow that means come, come follow me in Hebrew, I guess. She taught us this. And so our neighbor, Herman Zimmerman, he raised sheep. And he had a mother sheep. She'd given birth to a brand new baby lamb, and she didn't want anything to do with it, which I guess happens sometimes with baby lambs and sheep. And so he came down and he asked my sister Christy, who was probably 5, 6 years old at the time, would you like this baby sheep? And she named it Tahu, because that's what she knew that this sheep would reply to her, because, that's what Tahu. So she had done that, and
sheep know Hebrew. So
apparently, and so this was Christy's, and it followed her everywhere. It was the sheep of her pasture. Because she basically bottle fed it from from birth. It was a part of who she was. For those years that we had this sheep, Tahu, and it followed her everywhere. Every time she'd go out, it'd come running up to the fence to see her, and it'd follow her all over the fields.
Did it follow her to school one day?
No, because we had to ride a 45-minute bus ride, and couldn't figure out how to get up the steps.
I thought it was because it was against the rules.
Oh, well, it would have been, I'm sure. But so whenever I read passages about the sheep of the pasture, I think about Tahu and Christy, and that love that this sheep had for it. The one who had fed it and cared for it and nurtured it. It's a great parallel for me.
Yeah. But here, the thing with the Psalm is God doesn't just care for us and feed us. He made us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have some issues. I have some issues with that,
You do not.
With how God made me,
I want to file a complaint with someone.
I know. Why, Yeah, I think everyone can say that. But here's the reality. He made us the way, with our temperaments, with our challenges, with all of that. And it's when we come to him, it's when we answer his call that we find that he leads us beside quiet waters, quiet pastures, and just in beauty. Yeah. So is it any wonder that we enter his gates with thanksgiving?
When I was a freshman in high school, we went to Oakwood Park. It was a camp that they were running up there. It was different from Epworth Forest and things, but there was the one who was in charge of the camp that we were in, and that was Mike Dominick. Do you know Mike?
I know Mike.
All right. So Mike would sing this song from verse 4, right? I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart. But and Mike is the best, all right? But he played a guitar faster than anyone I've ever known in my life. And I mean, we laughed about the fact that sometimes we could see smoke coming off of the strings because he would we called him Rapid Wrist Dominic because it was so fast. So whenever I read this verse 4, it's not that important, I guess. But whenever I read this verse 4, it takes me back to, and I think for a reason, that summer was formative. It helped form who I am and helped me understand that entering with Thanksgiving. Mike, if Mike did nothing else right, which I know he did a lot right in his ministry, but one of the things that he did was he taught people how to have joy in the Lord. And this verse takes me back to that minute, takes me into the courts with praise in my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll admit that that isn't how I always enter into worship with Thanksgiving. Um,
Yeah.
I mentioned the kind of in jest that, hey, I've got some complaints. He
Right.
made me. Hey, I got
Mhm.
some complaints. But I think that's what steals our gratitude. We have all these complaints and all these gripes.
Mhm. Mhm.
And really, God has blessed us, especially if you live in America. Oh my goodness, we have so much, but yet. Uh, when things don't happen the way we want them to, or maybe you want to go buy something and you can't for some reason, it really, I mean, that is an American problem, right? I know, I actually know someone that used to get so angry because they didn't have a lot of money, and so they'd save their money up and they would go to buy a certain item, and for whatever reason it was like out of stock or discontinued, and it's like I get so mad when I finally end up in a place where I can buy something and I can't buy it. And that's kind of funny. And he was kind of joking in a way, but those little things take away our joy, but also
Yeah.
take away our gratitude, because our focus is on what we don't have rather than what we do. That he made us, we are his, we are the sheep of his pasture, so that we can enter into his gates with thanksgiving, his courts with praise,
Mhm.
and we can give thanks and praise his name. And then we really, in verse 5, get into I guess, the center of who God is.
Yeah, and this goes back to what you were saying last week about how these are elemental to our understanding of all of the Psalms, because verse 5 tells us the very character of who God is,
Yeah.
right? Unfailing
Yeah.
love that
At,
continues forever.
at the core, at the foundation of who God
Yeah,
is, he is good.
yeah.
And what does it mean? What does it mean to be good? And I don't know that this is actually correct, but I kind of wonder if the psalmist isn't actually defining what goodness is
Mm.
in the next two
Mm.
lines. Unfailing love has
You should
said,
look that up and study it.
I've been looking at it all week. But to me, it seems like a definition, because a lot of times the Psalms, they're poetry with parallelism, and so the lines coming after actually explain the one that goes before. Shout with joy to the Lord,
Mhm.
all the earth. What does that look like? Well, it looks like worshiping him with gladness, coming before him, singing with joy. Acknowledge that the Lord is good. Well, why or how? Well, because he made us and we are his people, sheep of his pasture. And then it continues to do that. And so I think this last piece really is defining God's goodness, his hesed love, which is even more than unfailing love. It's a gracious love. It's a love that meets us at the point of our need, even when we don't, well, especially when we don't deserve it. And it continues forever. It doesn't end, it doesn't stop. And his faithfulness, you can take that to the bank.
Well, I'm sorry you didn't like this psalm, Dave. I'm sorry it didn't speak to you.
I know,
How
I don't
beautiful.
know.
How great.
I know. And it's amazing how much the psalmist says with just a few lines.
We could all learn from that.
We could. Yes.
I mean, really. I mean, I think that's the point. It doesn't wander off into, let me tell you the history of the Israelites. Let me tell you about all of the things. It's just, here are the facts,
Yeah.
right? This is the truth about what we need to know about God. Is this the last psalm in the Song of Ascents?
Uh, you mean in the book
Yeah,
4 of
yeah.
the Psalms? No, I think it's Psalm 106.
Okay, so we've got a few more. So this is kind of
Yeah.
though in the center of this section in book 4 that
Yeah. I think, yeah. Yeah.
kind of everything within kind of pivots around this, because it just hits hard, and it hits right at home,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
beautiful.
And really, the whole point of pondering Psalms isn't necessarily to understand all of the Hebrew or the grammar or
Right. Yeah.
anything. It's to allow the Psalms to become alive in our lives so that we might live in the way that the Psalm is pointing out to live. Because it's possible to study these things to death, but yet go away unchanged and unmoved.
Yeah.
And you understand the why and the how, but you really haven't allowed it to sink deep in. And that's why we spend so
Yeah.
long looking at each one of these things in our own lives every week, because we want to live these things out.
Well, and I think one of the things that has occurred to me as we've been doing this over the last 30 weeks together or so is that one of the ways that God has made me, no complaints here, is that
Well, that's what
I
I hope.
really, I really associate the passages of the Bible that really speak to me the most often are those that associate with me in a visual way. And I've said it, I love the visual of this one. I
Yeah.
love the way
Yeah.
this tells that story. But just like in this one, the picture of Tahu and of Mike Dominick,
Yeah.
and it takes me back to that moment where God was active in a way. I mean, you didn't hear Christy call for Tahu without thinking of David protecting his sheep, and then what that means when God calls us. I don't think about verse 4 without thinking of Mike in that week of camp and how much that meant to me during that time. So everybody gets something different from the passages, I guess is what I want to say. I am a visual learner. I really enjoy that. So if I can create an image in my head, all the better. But some people just I don't know. How did you process this? How did that live in your heart?
I'd have to go back and think about that. I think what really hit me going through this was especially verse 5, because, again, it's the foundation of who God is. And one of the things that the Psalms teach us is who God is. A lot of the other scriptures kind of teach us how God interacts with his people, how to follow him, the type of life to live before him. But really the Psalms do all of that, but really focus on, who is this God? Well, he is good. His unfailing love continues forever. His faithfulness to each generation, slow to anger, ready to forgive, just this beautiful. And a lot of people have issues with God, and you say, okay, well, what do you think God's like? And they'll come up with a list, and it's like, you know what? I'd have issues with that God too. And not to make this longer than what it needs to be. But some people say, oh, I could never follow a God that sends people to hell. And it's like, when you read this, he's trying to save us from that. He's not sending us there. He's providing a rescue and a way. Why? Because he is good, and he wants none of us, because we are his people. We're the sheep of his pasture. And I think, culture or the enemy, however you want to see it, has really turned that whole thing upside down to see him as the bad guy, when all along he's trying to rescue us from a hell that we're already in. And I just think what God does is amazing, because it's all by grace. We don't deserve it. And so we can enter his courts with thanksgiving, and we can sing with joy, because we are his and we are his sheep, and he loves us and cares for us.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, and I think I think our reflection this week really boils down what it is we try, what we're finding in all of these each time. There's something that God wants to tell us, and God wants to speak in our hearts. Yeah. And it's just beautiful.
And I hope that this, our reflections have been helpful to all you who are watching, that you would take something significant away from this psalm. And if not, spend some more time with it and just allow it to sink into your soul. And next time we'll be taking a look at Psalm 101. And it's a little bit longer, but not a lot longer, I don't think. So anyway, I want to thank you, Curt, for being on this journey with me. And
my privilege, believe me.
And I was going to say, it's my privilege to be on this journey with you.
And I feel like you've really stepped up your game. You're wearing a shirt with a collar. You've got guitars hanging on your wall. I think it's made you a better person.
I've got my T-shirt on underneath.
Oh, that's excellent.
And I'm just wearing this for this show, after this.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
You live in your pajamas the most of the time.
Yeah. I'm just
All right.
glad I'm just glad you decided to put a shirt on, because earlier.
It was hot in here.
All right. Well, we will
All right.
see you guys next time, and blessings as you take a look at Psalm 101.
All right. See you then.
How did all this take place?
So Reverend Kenneth Fast, he was probably 4 feet tall and about 4 feet wide, but such a wonderful old man.
Yeah.
And he would drive. Well, anyway, so we're standing up. He would call us up. Todd and I would come up for the offering, and we'd hold our plates in front of us. And then he'd lay these big hams of a hand on our shoulders, and then he'd pray. And then we would go down and we'd collect the offering up this, it was the old kind of church, kind of in a half round, up a hill. So we'd done this weeks, but then we're standing there, and we both got our eyes closed because we're good boys, and he's praying, and all of a sudden I hear this, and I mean, then you hear this splash, and then it splashes out of the offering tray in onto the floor, and it was everywhere. It was so disgusting. And the other thing about this little church, it had no running water. It was landlocked by gravestones all the way around it. They planted dead people all around this church, and there was no place to dig a well. And there was an outhouse in the back. You could go into the outhouse and use the JCPenney catalog to wipe. So Mom had to drive home. It took her 20 minutes to get home, fill up a 5-gallon bucket of hot water, and drive 20 minutes back. And I'm sure the water was just splashing all over the place. And we went ahead and continued.